Bully targets. Black student then learns her mom is the new school superintendent. You seriously gonna sit there like you belong here? The voice came sharp and loud enough to snap heads around the cafeteria. Kennedy Lewis froze mid-bite of her sandwich. Her heart thumped, the sound echoing in her ears. She looked up slowly, already knowing what she'd see. Madison Heller, blonde, smug, captain of the cheer squad and self-declared queen of Middleton High. She stood with her arms crossed, 3 other girls flanking her like some royal guard. Kennedy swallowed hard. This wasn't new. It had been happening every day since the first week of school. But this time, something in Madison's tone felt different, like she was itching for a public scene. Kennedy glanced around. Some students stared with interest. Others pretended to look away, but no one moved. No one ever did. That's what made this worse. She straightened up in her seat, trying to hold on to her dignity. "I'm just eating lunch, Madison. Same as you." Madison laughed. "No, not the same. This is the senior side of the cafeteria. You think just because your mom got you transferred here, you can act like you run the place?" Kennedy clenched her jaw. She hadn't told anyone about her mom. That her transfer had nothing to do with favoritism, that they'd moved back to Middleton after her mom got a new job, and this was the only public high school in the district. But Madison had clearly done her research, or maybe just assumed. "I didn't ask to be here," Kennedy said quietly but firmly, "and I'm not bothering anyone." "Not yet," Madison said, "but give it time. Girls like you always make a mess of things." The words hung there, cold, racist. Kennedy's stomach twisted. Her hand gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white. She saw a teacher across the room glance their way, hesitate, then look back down at her laptop. Useless. Suddenly, Madison reached for Kennedy's tray and flipped it onto the floor. The sandwich, apple, and milk splattered across the polished tile. Gasps rose. Kennedy stood so fast her chair screeched. "What is your problem?" Her voice cracked, not from fear, but fury. Madison stepped closer. "My problem is you don't belong in my world." Kennedy's eyes burned. Her hands shook, but she refused to back down. "You don't get to decide who belongs here." A hush fell over the room. Then a new voice cut in. "What's going on here?" It was Mr. Taylor, the assistant principal. He looked tired but alert. He glanced between the 2 girls, frowning. Madison stepped back immediately, flipping her hair and slipping into her sweet, innocent tone. "Oh, nothing really. Kennedy just dropped her tray. I was about to help clean it up." Kennedy opened her mouth to protest, but Taylor had already bought the act. "That true, Kennedy?" Her voice dropped. "Not even close." But Taylor sighed. "Let's not make this a thing. Just clean it up and let's move on." He walked away before she could respond. Kennedy knelt and picked up the food in silence. Her eyes burned with humiliation. She could feel Madison smirking behind her, victorious again. But that night, things changed. When Kennedy got home, her mother was waiting at the kitchen table. Black pantsuit, heels off, sleeves rolled up. Victoria Lewis had presence even in her down moments. She was a woman who'd commanded entire districts, turned around broken school systems. And tomorrow morning she would walk into Middleton Unified School District as its newly appointed superintendent. Kennedy hesitated. "Can I tell you something?" Victoria looked up, concern immediately rising in her eyes. "Always." Kennedy told her everything. The harassment, the tray, the silence from teachers, every humiliating moment stacked on top of each other like bricks on her back. Her mom listened, fully. No interruptions. When Kennedy finished, Victoria leaned back in her chair, her expression unreadable, And then she spoke. "Thank you for telling me. And I promise you this stops now." The next morning, Middleton High buzzed with quiet tension. A special assembly had been called. Rumors flew. New security policy, a scandal, new rules. In the gym, students gathered on the bleachers, restless and loud. Then a hush fell as the principal walked out, clearing his throat into the mic. "Students, faculty, please welcome the new superintendent of Middleton Unified School District, Ms. Victoria Lewis." Gasps, whispers. Kennedy watched from the back, heart pounding. Victoria walked to the podium like she owned the place. Hair pulled back into a sleek bun, navy suit, sharp, expression calm and focused. "Good morning," she began. "I won't take much of your time, but I need to make something very clear from day one." Her eyes scanned the students. "This district will not tolerate bullying, racism, intimidation. If you think those things are jokes or just high school stuff, think again." Somewhere, Madison sat frozen, eyes wide. Victoria continued. "We're here to build something better, and that starts now." A beat. "Also," she added, gaze cool and unflinching, "to be transparent, I have a daughter who attends this school, and if anyone thinks that's a free pass to hurt her or anyone else, I suggest you reevaluate your choices, quickly." Gasps again. Heads turned. Madison visibly paled. Kennedy sat straighter. For the first time in weeks, she felt something shift. Not just safety, power. The game had just changed, and Madison Heller had no idea what was coming next. The moment the morning bell rang at Meadow Creek High, Kennedy knew it wasn't going to be just another Monday. The whispers started before she even stepped into homeroom. She could feel them, the sideways glances, the muffled giggles behind cupped hands, the lingering stares from students who usually ignored her. Something was off. As she approached her locker, her heart sank. The metal door was covered in crudely scribbled words in red marker. "Go back to the ghetto." Next to it, someone had taped a printout of a monkey with her face photoshopped onto it. Her breath caught in her throat. Her fingers trembled as she ripped the paper off, crumpling it in her hand. "Nice new decor," a voice called out behind her. Kennedy turned, already knowing. Brielle Monroe stood a few feet away with her arms crossed, flanked by her usual backup, Piper and Lauren. Brielle's hair was tied up in a high ponytail, her makeup flawless as always. But it was the smirk on her face that Kennedy noticed most. It wasn't just mean. It was triumphant. "You look mad. You shouldn't be. I worked real hard on that Photoshop," Brielle added, her voice dripping with mock sweetness. Students nearby were pretending not to listen, but their ears were tuned in like satellites. Kennedy clenched her fists. "You really think this is funny?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "I think it's hilarious," Brielle shrugged. "But if it hurts your little feelings, maybe you should go cry to your mom." "Oh, wait, I forgot. She's probably too busy working at some fast food joint to care." Kennedy's chest tightened. That last comment wasn't just cruel. It was deliberate. A calculated jab. Kennedy didn't respond. She just stared at Brielle, forcing herself not to flinch, not to give her the satisfaction. Miss Penrose, the history teacher, appeared down the hall and gave a quick look, but said nothing. Kennedy noticed. Everyone noticed. That was the worst part. The silence. By lunch, Kennedy was barely holding it together. She sat alone in the corner of the cafeteria, pushing macaroni around on her tray. Her best friend, Amara, was out sick, and suddenly Kennedy felt like she was on an island. That's when something inside her shifted. She pulled out her phone and scrolled to her recent texts, stopping at the last message from her mom that read, "Call me if you need anything, sweetheart." Kennedy tapped it and hit call. "Hey, Mom," she said, her voice low. "You busy?" On the other end, a pause. "Never too busy for you. What's going on?" Kennedy hesitated, then let it all out. The locker, the photo, the insults, the silence from the teachers. There was a beat of silence. "I'll be there tomorrow morning," her mom said firmly. "And don't worry, things are about to change." The next morning, Kennedy walked into school with her head a little higher. Her mom hadn't told her what she was planning, but there was a different tone in her voice, calm, steady, and powerful. As she made her way to homeroom, the hallway suddenly hushed. Students stared past her toward the main office. Curious, Kennedy followed their gaze. Standing near the front entrance was her mother, Maya Bellamy, dressed in a sleek navy pantsuit, flanked by 2 district officials. Mr. Sheffield, the principal, was speaking to her with a nervous laugh, sweat beading on his forehead. Kennedy blinked. Wait, that can't be right. Brielle walked by at that exact moment, about to toss another snide comment her way, but paused mid-sentence when she caught sight of Maya. Her mouth opened, then closed again like a broken hinge. "Is that your mom?" Brielle asked slowly, a rare note of uncertainty in her voice. Kennedy didn't answer. Instead, she kept walking until she was standing right beside Maya, who turned and smiled at her daughter like nothing in the world was out of place. "Maya Bellamy," Maya said, extending a hand to the crowd that had formed. "Your new school superintendent." The entire hallway froze. Even Mr. Sheffield looked like he might faint. "You what?" Brielle whispered. Maya's eyes shifted to Brielle, then to Kennedy. "Let's just say I have a few policies to implement, starting today." Kennedy's mouth curved slightly. Not a grin, just enough to say, "You thought you knew who I was." But the best part? Maya hadn't even raised her voice. Inside the main office, the tension was thick. Maya sat across from Mr. Sheffield, reviewing printed records of discipline reports, or the lack thereof, over the past semester. Her eyes were sharp, each line she read hardening her expression. "I'm seeing a pattern here," Maya said, tapping the paper. "Complaints filed by black students, and no action taken." Sheffield shifted in his seat. "Well, you know how teenagers are. They exaggerate." Maya leaned in. "My daughter had a racial slur taped to her locker. That's not exaggeration, that's harassment. And I expect consequences." Of course," he said quickly. "We'll look into it." "You'll do more than look into it," she cut in, her voice calm but unflinching. "There's a new sheriff in town, and I'm not about to let this school sink into complacency." Outside, word was already spreading. Students had taken photos, some already posted on Instagram. "Kennedy's mom is the superintendent?" Brielle looked like she saw a ghost. And somewhere down the hall, Brielle stood near her locker, watching the feed scroll through her phone, her face pale. The echo of her own words, about Kennedy's mom working at a fast food joint, rang in her ears like a bad joke she was suddenly ashamed of. But this wasn't over, because Brielle was used to being the queen of this school, and queens, even when shaken, don't fall quietly. Kennedy, meanwhile, stood quietly outside the main office, her back straight, her eyes forward. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she wasn't alone. Like maybe this school wasn't as broken as it had seemed, but she also knew this was just the beginning. Because when people are used to unchecked power, they don't give it up without a fight. The hallway was silent except for the faint echo of sneakers against the tile. Kennedy walked quickly, shoulders tight, arms crossed over her chest. It had been 2 weeks since the cafeteria incident, and though the public humiliation had eased, something more sinister was now happening. Kennedy didn't say a word about it to her mom. Not yet. Not until she was sure. But every day her locker was a new war zone. Someone had taken to sliding torn-up notes through the slits. Go back where you came from. Scholarship charity case. And worse. There was gum on her books yesterday, and today someone had drawn a monkey face on her English binder. She had a pretty good idea who was behind it. Madison. And she wasn't wrong. That morning, Madison sat at the back of Mr. Dean's English class, surrounded by her usual entourage, chuckling behind fake whispers. When Kennedy walked in, Madison gave her a slow, deliberate look up and down before turning to whisper something into Lily's ear. They both laughed. Mr. Dean, busy prepping the projector, didn't notice the tension thickening in the room. Kennedy took her seat quietly. She didn't even glance at them. She'd learned that reacting just gave them more fuel, but it still stung. Every smirk, every whisper, every accidental shoulder bump in the hallway. Midway through class, a folded note landed on her desk. At first, she ignored it. Then, glancing sideways, she saw Madison staring directly at her, daring her to open it. Kennedy opened it. It read, in black marker, "Heard your mom cleans toilets. Cute. Guess you'll follow in her footsteps." Her breath caught. She folded it back up slowly, her hands trembling. She didn't cry. She wouldn't. Not here. Not in front of them. But something inside her hardened. The words weren't just hurtful, they were wrong, because her mother wasn't a janitor. She was the new superintendent. The one who'd quietly started 2 days ago without announcing it to the students, wanting to observe first, listen before speaking. Even Kennedy didn't know all the details yet. All she knew was that her mom was handling it low-key, watching, preparing for real change. But now she realized she couldn't wait for her mom to notice. Madison was crossing lines, personal lines. And this wasn't just bullying, it was cruelty rooted in something deeper. After school, Kennedy went straight to the office, not to report Madison, to ask a question. "Hi," she said to the secretary, trying to keep her voice steady. "Is Dr. Evelyn Brooks in her office?" The woman behind the desk looked surprised but smiled. "She is, sweetie. Would you like me to call her?" "No," Kennedy said. "I'll wait. But could you tell her her daughter needs to see her?" The secretary blinked, eyebrows rising, then nodded. "Of course." 10 minutes later, the glass door opened, and Evelyn Brooks stepped out. Her tailored navy suit and calm presence contrasted sharply with the hectic energy of the office. But when she saw Kennedy's face, her expression changed. She walked over quickly. "Kennedy, what's going on?" Kennedy stood. "Can we talk, privately?" They went into her office, and Evelyn shut the door behind them. "What happened?" Kennedy hesitated. Then she pulled the folded note out of her backpack and slid it across the desk. Her mother picked it up, read it, and her jaw clenched. "This isn't the first time," Kennedy said, her voice quiet. "It's been going on for weeks. She started with jokes in the cafeteria, but now it's getting worse. My locker, my stuff, my name." "Who?" her mother asked, already knowing. "Madison Kent. Her father's the VP of a bank. Apparently, that gives her permission to treat people like trash." Evelyn sat back, silent for a beat. "I've been trying to observe before making changes," she said carefully. "But this changes things. I didn't want to bring this to you like a favor," Kennedy said, eyes hot with shame. I can handle myself, Mom. But I thought you should know. Because I'm not the only one she treats this way. Evelyn nodded. You were right to tell me. What are you going to do? There was a pause, a flicker of determination in Evelyn's gaze. I'm going to meet Madison. The next morning, Evelyn didn't go straight to her office. She went to Miss Douglas's homeroom class, where she knew Madison would be first period. She waited until the bell rang, then knocked and entered with quiet authority. Good morning, class, she said. I'm Dr. Evelyn Brooks, the new superintendent. I'd like to borrow a student for a quick meeting. She didn't need to say the name. All eyes turned to Madison. Madison blinked, unsure whether to stand, play confused, or act smug. She settled on cocky. That's me, I guess, she said with a grin. Once outside the room, her smile dropped. What's this about? Madison asked. Evelyn didn't respond at first. She led Madison down the hallway to her private office. It wasn't until the door closed behind them that Evelyn spoke. I received this note yesterday, she said, holding it up. I'm sure you recognize it. Madison's face stayed blank. No idea. Evelyn placed it on the desk. Let's be honest. You've been targeting my daughter, bullying her, harassing her. That ends today. Madison scoffed. I didn't know she was your daughter. That makes it worse, Evelyn said sharply. Because you felt empowered to humiliate someone just because you could, because you thought no one would stop you. Madison's smirk faded. Evelyn leaned in. I am not a teacher who needs to clear things with your parents. I am not a counselor who has to dance around consequences. I am the top of this district, and I will ensure that every student, no matter their background, is treated with dignity. Madison looked away, her confidence crumbling. So what? You're going to suspend me? No, Evelyn said, voice calm but firm. I'm going to require you to come to a restorative justice session. You'll sit across from the students you've bullied. You'll hear how your actions affected them. And then, if you're ready, you'll make it right. I'm not doing that. You will, Evelyn said, or your parents will be invited to a hearing about your repeated behavioral violations. I imagine that won't look good on your college recommendations. Madison froze. Evelyn stood. This is your chance to learn, to become better. Take it. When Madison left the office, her face was pale. She didn't return to homeroom. She went straight to the bathroom and locked herself in a stall. Back in class, Kennedy sat quietly, unaware of what had just gone down. But a few minutes later, her phone buzzed in her pocket. A message from an unknown number. It read, I'm sorry, I'll leave you alone. For the first time in weeks, Kennedy exhaled. But what she didn't know was that this incident would ignite something bigger than just school drama. Parents, board members, community figures, all about to find out that the new superintendent wasn't just here to observe. She was here to shake the system, and the storm was just beginning. Nina sat at the kitchen table trying to focus on her history homework, but her mind kept replaying the words from the hallway. Your mama's just a janitor. Her fingers clenched around the pencil until the wood creaked. Her mom had always told her, you don't have to fight fire with fire, but never let anyone burn you down. Easier said than done when the fire came from all directions. Her mother, Dr. Camille Brooks, walked in wearing a navy blue blazer over a white blouse, hair perfectly tied back in a low twist. She had that calm authority about her, the kind that silenced a room without a word. But tonight she saw the crack in her daughter's expression. What happened? Camille asked, setting down her leather briefcase. Same old, Nina muttered, her voice flat. Jade and her crew are relentless. Now they're saying you're just a janitor who probably snuck into the superintendent's office for fun. Camille raised an eyebrow, took a breath, then reached across the table to hold her daughter's hand. "They're lashing out because they're afraid of change," she said gently. "But I didn't work my way up from a South Side school with busted heaters to stop here. Neither will you. You're stronger than them, Nina." Nina blinked back, the tears forming. "I just want it to stop." Her mother nodded. "Then we'll make it stop, together." The next morning, Principal DeWitt called a mandatory faculty meeting. Word spread fast. Dr. Brooks had requested it. Teachers whispered. The secretary glanced nervously at her notes, and Mr. Hanley, the AP government teacher, said under his breath, "She's going to gut us. I just know it." Camille entered the staff lounge with the quiet power of someone who had seen too much to be shaken by whispers. She walked up to the podium, placed a folder down, and looked up at the staff, her eyes calm but fierce. "I've been watching, listening, and reviewing," she began. "There is a cultural problem here, and let me be clear. This is not about isolated student behavior. This is about leadership, about adults who see but say nothing, about a system that lets one group of kids feel safe while another walks the halls in fear." A few teachers shifted uncomfortably. "Some of you have been complicit. Some of you have been silent. Both are harmful. Starting today, we are rewriting this culture." DeWitt tried to interrupt. "Dr. Brooks, perhaps we can—" "I'm not done," she said, cutting him off with a firm glance. "This school needs change, and it's not going to be convenient." Later that afternoon, Jade strutted through the cafeteria like she always did, chin high, ponytail bouncing. But something was off. A couple of students stared at her with curiosity. Some even laughed behind their hands. She stopped in front of Nina's table. "Your mom really thinks she runs the place now, huh?" she said loudly. "Heard she's on some power trip." Nina didn't even flinch. "You'll see." A few moments later, the cafeteria TVs, usually muted, flickered to life. Dr. Brooks appeared on screen during morning announcements for the first time ever. She addressed the students directly. "We all deserve to feel safe and seen. Starting today, there's a new protocol. Every student will have access to an anonymous reporting system. Every complaint will be reviewed by a new oversight panel made up of students, teachers, and parents. And bullies, regardless of who they are, will face real consequences." Jade's smile faltered. The twist came when Camille added, "And to those who felt ignored or silenced, your voices matter now. Use them." That afternoon, Nina was approached by Mia, a quiet freshman who rarely spoke in class. "Hey," Mia said, her voice small, "I submitted a report about Jade, about everything she's done. Not just to you, to a bunch of us." Nina blinked, surprised. "You did?" Mia nodded. "Your mom gave us courage. You did too. It wasn't just Mia." That day, 7 anonymous complaints were filed. By the end of the week, over 20. Each one detailed incidents Jade and her friends had orchestrated: racial comments, locker vandalism, social media harassment. The school was suddenly buzzing, not with gossip, but accountability. At the same time, Camille pulled DeWitt into a private meeting. The walls were thin enough that the secretary heard raised voices. "You protected her," Camille said coldly. "You let her roam unchecked because her family donates to the school's fundraisers." "She's a child," DeWitt replied defensively. "She's a bully, and you enabled her." Camille dropped a thick file on the table. "These are statements, screenshots, and records. You can resign now, or the board will remove you." That night, Nina found her mom sitting on the back porch, sipping a mug of chamomile tea. "You didn't tell me about Principal DeWitt," Nina said. "I didn't need to," Camille replied. "Sometimes the best justice doesn't need to be announced. It just works." Nina sat beside her, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. Across town, in a house lined with silver-framed country club photos, Jade's father stared at his daughter in disbelief. 20 complaints? And you thought none of it would catch up to you?" Jade didn't respond. For the first time, her bravado had cracked. But the biggest twist came the next morning. Jade entered the school with a forced smile, only to find a new sign posted outside the front office. Acting Principal, Dr. Camille Brooks. She stopped dead in her tracks. And for the first time ever, Jade felt what it was like to be the one on the outside looking in. As Monday morning arrived, a thick, expectant silence hung in the halls of Glendale Academy. Word had traveled faster than wildfire. Students whispered in clusters near lockers, staff shifted uncomfortably behind their desks, and even the usually cocky Principal Robbins had a measured expression as he waited by the main entrance. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't talking. He was waiting. At 7:45 a.m., a sleek black town car pulled up to the curb. When the door opened, out stepped Dr. Naomi Sinclair. She wore a crisp, tailored navy blue suit and a composed expression that said, this wasn't just about a job. It was about reclaiming dignity, reshaping culture, and confronting those who thought their power was unshakable. Behind her trailed a silent Ava in uniform, head held high, every step beside her mother radiating calm strength. The same school that had once made her feel like she didn't belong now had to watch her walk in like she owned every hallway. Principal Robbins, palms slightly sweating, extended a hand. "Dr. Sinclair, welcome. We're honored," Naomi interrupted smoothly. "We'll go straight to my office. Is the conference room ready?" "Yes, of course, right this way." Inside the administrative wing, Naomi took her seat at the head of the long table, across from Robbins, with several teachers seated along the sides. One empty chair remained for someone who was running late. That someone was Madison Carter. The girl's parents had received the mandatory attendance notice over the weekend, and after several voicemails and one very assertive call from the district, they finally agreed. But they hadn't come with apologies. They came with lawyers. At 8:07 a.m., the door swung open. Madison walked in, arms crossed, chin lifted in defiance. Behind her were Mr. and Mrs. Carter, her father a polished investment banker, her mother a real estate executive, both with tight-lipped smiles and eyes filled with disbelief. Clearly, they thought this meeting was a waste of their time. "Let's get one thing clear," Mrs. Carter began, even before sitting down. "Our daughter is not a bully. She's just been misunderstood." Naomi stayed silent for a long moment. Then she reached down, pressed play on the small speaker next to her. A recording played. It was grainy, but unmistakable. Madison's voice filled the room. "Why don't you go back to wherever your mom bought you from, Ava? This school was better before people like you showed up." You could hear the gasps, the laughter of onlookers, the hurt silence on Ava's part. Robbins froze. Several teachers shifted in their seats. Even Madison, for a moment, paled. But Naomi didn't flinch. "I believe that's the sound of intent," she said quietly. "Intent to isolate, intent to humiliate, intent to demean." Mrs. Carter opened her mouth, then closed it again. "I also have written statements from 3 students, video footage from hallway cameras showing consistent harassment, and a teacher's formal observation report, all pointing to a pattern." "Kids fight," Mr. Carter finally snapped. "It's not criminal." Naomi's gaze hardened. No, but it is a systemic problem when it goes unchecked, when the adults in charge refuse to act because of status, money, or fear. A beat passed. Then Naomi added, "Your daughter will be temporarily suspended pending a full hearing. Glendale's culture is changing, effective immediately." Madison shot up from her chair. "This is insane. You're just doing this because your daughter is—" Naomi's voice cut through, firm, controlled. "Because my daughter is what, Madison?" The girl froze. Ava, silent until now, finally spoke. "Because I didn't stay quiet." Naomi looked at her daughter. "Exactly." There was no yelling, no courtroom-style confrontation, but the air in that room shifted forever. For the first time, Ava wasn't the one being examined. It was Madison. And the more she twisted in her chair, the more the room realized she was unraveling. Later that day, as students gathered in the gym for an all-school assembly, Naomi stepped onto the stage. "I came here not just as your new superintendent," she said into the microphone, "but as a mother, as a black woman, as someone who believes every child, no matter their background, name, or skin color, deserves to feel safe when they walk these halls." Silence swept over the bleachers. "I won't tolerate bullying. I won't tolerate racism. And I won't tolerate silence." A few heads bowed. Some students clapped slowly. A teacher wiped away a tear. "And if you've been silent because you were afraid, know this: you are not alone anymore." That night, Ava sat beside her mom on the couch, curled up under a blanket. "You really changed everything today," Ava said. Naomi turned toward her. "No, sweetheart, you did." Ava looked confused. "Me? You stood your ground. You didn't let them break you, and you gave me the reason to fight harder." In that moment, with the world finally tilting toward justice, Ava felt something she hadn't in a long time. Powerful, safe, home. By Monday morning, the entire school was buzzing with whispers and nervous glances. It was like a storm had rolled in over the weekend, and no one was sure who'd be swept away next. The air felt heavier. Lockers slammed softer. Even the usual hallway noise dipped a few decibels, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Jayla walked into Jefferson Middle with her head high, braids pulled back into a slick ponytail, wearing her future astronaut hoodie with the sleeves rolled up. There was no trace of fear in her walk anymore. There was something unshakable about her presence now, like she knew something the rest of them didn't. Maybe because she did. "Yo, Jayla," a boy from her science class said with awe. "That was your mom at the assembly, right? That was wild." "She really made Mr. Thorne look dumb," another whispered, barely loud enough for Jayla to hear. Jayla just smiled and nodded, saying nothing. She didn't need to. The power had shifted. Everyone could feel it. But not everyone was ready to accept that. Savannah was back, and she was livid. Gone was the smug superiority. Now she was all tight lips and narrowed eyes. Her father, Robert Hensley, had spent the weekend on damage control, pulling strings and calling in favors to keep his influence intact. But his hands were tied now. Too many eyes were on him, and Superintendent Jordan wasn't backing down. Savannah cornered Jayla by the girls' bathroom before first period. "You think you're hot stuff now, huh?" she hissed, checking the hallway to make sure no teachers were near. Jayla didn't flinch. "I don't think anything. I just stopped letting people like you decide who I am." Savannah scoffed. "You really think this changes anything? Your mom can sit in that office all she wants, but out here, this is still my school." Jayla looked her dead in the eyes. "Not anymore," Savannah's jaw clenched. "You made a mistake thinking you could embarrass my dad and not pay for it." "I didn't embarrass him," Jayla said coolly. "He did that all by himself." The tension between them crackled like electricity. Before Savannah could say anything else, a teacher rounded the corner and she backed off, but not before muttering under her breath, "This isn't over." In the superintendent's office, Camille Jordan wasn't just fielding calls. She was running a full-scale investigation. After the town hall-style assembly, emails had flooded in from parents, former students, and even staff. People who had stayed silent for years suddenly found the courage to speak up. What began as a personal mission to protect her daughter had turned into something much bigger. "I need you to take a look at this," said Miss Ramirez, the assistant principal, as she handed Camille a USB drive. Camille plugged it into her laptop and scanned the folder. "Security footage," Ramirez said. "Hallways, classrooms, even the teacher's lounge. A few things didn't sit right with me over the past few months." Camille opened one of the files, and there it was. A recording of Savannah's group surrounding a smaller student in the hallway, pushing his books to the ground and laughing as he scrambled to collect them. No teacher stepped in. No one helped. Another clip showed Mr. Thorne laughing with Robert Hensley in the lounge, mocking entitled parents and overly sensitive students. Her stomach turned. "This is gold," Camille muttered. "We're going to use this." Meanwhile, in the teacher's lounge, things were getting tense. Mr. Thorne sat silently as the other teachers whispered around him. For the first time in years, he wasn't the loudest voice in the room. "You really poked the wrong bear," muttered Mrs. Ellis, a veteran English teacher who'd been quietly rooting for Camille since the first day. Thorne glared at her. "This isn't about bears. It's about discipline. That woman is letting kids run the school." "No," Ellis shot back. "She's reminding us we were supposed to teach them, not break them." Thorne pushed back from the table and stormed out. But it was too late. His empire was crumbling. That afternoon, Camille called an emergency faculty meeting. Jayla wasn't supposed to know what was said behind those closed doors, but word travels fast in middle school, and this time it came with receipts. By the end of the day, Mr. Thorne had been suspended pending investigation. When Jayla heard, she didn't cheer. She didn't even smile. She just sat on the front steps of the school and looked up at the sky, the afternoon sun pouring down warm over her face. "Did it feel good?" asked Naomi, sitting beside her. Jayla thought about it. "No," she said. "It felt necessary." Naomi leaned her head on Jayla's shoulder. "You're kinda a big deal now," Jayla chuckled. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves." But deep down, she knew this was more than just about her. The next day brought another surprise. The school board had called a public forum. Camille Jordan would be presenting findings on systemic issues in school discipline, with a focus on how racial bias had affected students across the district. Jayla sat in the front row with her mother as Camille took the stage. What followed was nothing short of jaw-dropping. Video clips, first-hand accounts, data charts, and then testimonials. I was suspended for bringing a water gun to school, while a white student who brought an actual pocket knife got detention. My son was sent to the principal's office 6 times in one semester for being disruptive. He has ADHD. His teacher never once followed his IEP. My daughter told me Savannah Hensley mocked her accent every day. I never thought anyone would listen until now. Camille let each speaker have their moment. Then she stepped back up, voice steady and strong. "This isn't about revenge. This is about repair. It's about doing better starting now." Silence filled the room. Then applause. It started slow, then built, then thundered. And just like that, the tide shifted again. Outside, as the crowd spilled into the parking lot, Jayla overheard a familiar voice behind her. "Jayla, wait up!" It was Savannah. But her tone was different now, lower, unsure. Jayla turned. "What do you want?" Savannah looked at her, eyes flickering with something new. Not quite apology, not quite defiance. I didn't know things were that bad for you," she muttered. Jayla raised an eyebrow. "You didn't care." Savannah opened her mouth, then closed it. "Maybe, but I see it now." Jayla stared at her for a beat, then said, "Seeing isn't enough. You have to change." And with that, she turned and walked away, head held high. In that moment, Jayla wasn't just a girl who stood up to a bully. She was a symbol, a voice, a catalyst. And the world had finally started listening. For the next few days, Kennedy stayed home from school. Her mother insisted. After the public humiliation of Principal Graves being suspended, the school board had launched an investigation into the entire handling of racial bias complaints at Meadowbrook Middle, and things were unraveling faster than anyone could have predicted. Kennedy, curled up on the couch with a blanket and her sketch pad, kept drawing scenes from the school. But unlike before, the expressions she captured weren't angry or fearful. They were powerful. She drew herself standing tall in the cafeteria, with students behind her. She sketched her mom at the school board meeting, looking like a giant among small, scrambling people. Her mother, Cassandra Hill, stood at the kitchen island, juggling back-to-back calls from district lawyers, board members, and reporters. The media had caught wind of the story. Superintendent's daughter bullied by staff and students' entire school faces reckoning. It was on local news, trending on social media, and stirring nationwide conversations. But it wasn't over. Not yet. That morning, Cassandra hung up the phone and sat beside her daughter. "They're ready to make a statement," she said softly. Kennedy glanced up. "Who?" "The school board. The investigation's done, and they've asked me to speak at tomorrow's assembly. They want transparency, accountability." Kennedy blinked. "You're going to the school? Like, back there?" Cassandra nodded. "We're both going, but this time you won't be alone." The next day, the air was thick with anticipation. Every student, teacher, and staff member was required to attend the special assembly in the auditorium. Rumors had been flying all week. Some students claimed the school was shutting down. Others whispered that half the staff would be fired. Kennedy walked in through the front doors with her head held high. She wore a tailored navy blazer, hair braided neatly down her back. Her mom walked beside her, dressed sharply but not flashy. They were a striking pair, elegant, composed, and purposeful. As they entered the auditorium, the noise slowly died down. Students whispered. Teachers stood awkwardly near the walls. Kennedy scanned the crowd. Hannah sat in the third row, her posture stiff, eyes avoiding Kennedy's. Mrs. Carver, the teacher who once doubted Kennedy's word, fidgeted in her seat. Even Coach Darnell looked like he'd rather vanish into the carpet. Then the board chair, Mr. Patel, took the podium. "Thank you all for being here today. This school has failed in its duty to provide a safe, inclusive, and equitable environment for all students. In particular, we have failed Kennedy Hill, and for that we offer not only our apology, but our action." Gasps rippled through the crowd. It wasn't often that someone in power admitted failure so directly. Several staff members have been placed on administrative leave, pending further action. This includes teachers and administrators who failed to report or respond appropriately to incidents of bullying and discrimination. Principal Graves has been terminated. There it was. Confirmed. The room went dead silent. And now I'd like to invite Superintendent Cassandra Hill to speak. Cassandra stood, walked to the front, and took the mic. But instead of launching into a speech, she turned and gestured for Kennedy to join her. The auditorium buzzed again. Kennedy hesitated for a beat, then walked forward. "I didn't expect to be here like this," Cassandra began. "I didn't expect my daughter to be treated differently because of the color of her skin. And I never imagined that silence from those in power would be more damaging than the bullying itself." Kennedy took a breath and stepped up beside her mom. "I just wanted to come to school and be myself," she said, her voice steady. "But that wasn't safe here, not because of every student, not because of every teacher, but because some people looked at me and saw a threat, a problem, someone who didn't belong." In the back of the auditorium, someone stood up. It was Mr. Daniels, the math teacher. "I want to say I'm sorry, Kennedy, for not doing more, for seeing things and not speaking up." Another voice joined in. A student, one of the older boys who'd once laughed when Hannah pushed Kennedy. "Same here. I saw it. I should have said something." One by one, people stood. Not everyone, but enough. It wasn't a perfect redemption, but it was real. Later, in the hallway, Kennedy walked past Hannah without flinching. Hannah turned, mouth half open like she wanted to say something, but the words never came. Kennedy kept walking. She didn't need an apology to move forward. What came next was bigger than one bully, one teacher, or even one school. Her story had sparked something wider, a review of district policies, training for staff, a hotline for student complaints. Cassandra made sure of it. And Kennedy? She found herself being interviewed by local news, featured in a campaign about youth leadership, even invited to speak at a high school panel. Not because she was a victim, but because she was a voice. The twist came that evening when Cassandra sat down with her laptop open and turned the screen toward Kennedy. "Guess who just emailed us?" she asked. Kennedy leaned in. "An admissions counselor from the New Horizons Academy for Arts and Leadership. They saw your sketches in the article." Kennedy's jaw dropped. "Wait, what? That's my dream school." "They want to meet with you. Portfolio review. Potential full scholarship." Kennedy covered her mouth in disbelief. "But that's in New York." "I know," Cassandra said, smiling. "We'll figure it out." For the first time in months, Kennedy felt light again. Not because justice had fully been served or because pain had magically disappeared, but because her truth had been heard, and her voice, her strength was finally opening doors. Not just for her, but for every kid like her who ever felt unseen. The auditorium was packed tighter than it had been all year. Parents, students, teachers, even some of the school board sat shoulder to shoulder, whispering nervously. The buzz around Roosevelt High was impossible to ignore. Everyone had heard something about what had gone down between Amanda, Kayla, and the mysterious new superintendent. No one knew what to expect tonight at the Spring Honor Assembly, but everyone sensed it was going to be unforgettable. Backstage, Kayla stood still in her royal blue blazer, heart racing beneath the spotlight's distant hum. Her name was printed on the program. She was being recognized for academic excellence and community service awards she had always dreamed of. But none of that felt real at this moment. Her eyes drifted to her mother, Dr. Morrison, who stood just feet away, dressed sharp, shoulders squared and calm as ever. "You ready?" Dr. Morrison asked gently, smoothing a loose strand of Kayla's curls. Kayla nodded. "You're coming out there with me?" Her mother shook her head slowly. "No, baby. This part's yours. You earned every bit of it." Across the stage curtain, Principal Delgado stepped up to the mic. Tonight we celebrate the best in our student body academic achievement, leadership, and resilience. There was polite applause. Then he added, "But before we proceed, I'd like to welcome someone who's only recently joined our district. Someone whose presence has already started shifting things for the better." He looked to the wings. Dr. Morrison stepped forward slowly. A few gasps erupted in the crowd. Amanda blinked hard from her seat in the front row. Her mom gripped her arm as if bracing for a storm. "She's the new superintendent?" she whispered, stunned. "Good evening," Dr. Morrison said, taking the mic. "I've only been with Roosevelt for a short time, but in that time I've seen some of the brightest young minds I've ever encountered." Her eyes found Kayla in the wings but didn't linger. "I've also seen how inequality and silence can cause just as much harm as action," she continued. "And I want to take a moment tonight to make something crystal clear. This district, this school, will no longer tolerate discrimination in any form, not in the classroom, not in the halls, and certainly not from those in leadership positions." Murmurs rippled across the crowd. She turned slightly, nodding to a woman standing quietly near the edge of the stage, Miss Carrington, Amanda's mother, and the PTA president. "I've had conversations this week that revealed patterns of exclusion and favoritism that do not reflect our values. That ends now. Effective immediately, we will be instituting mandatory training for faculty and staff on anti-bias education. And next week, the PTA board will undergo a full review, led by an independent committee." Amanda's mom shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "But tonight," Dr. Morrison said, her voice lifting, "belongs to the students. And one student in particular exemplifies strength, perseverance, and grace under pressure. She's stood tall even when others tried to diminish her. She's reminded us what true character looks like. Please welcome Kayla Morrison." A burst of applause erupted, growing louder and more heartfelt as Kayla walked out slowly, her eyes wide with disbelief. It wasn't just her classmates clapping. Teachers stood. Even some parents who'd avoided eye contact with her weeks ago were now cheering. Amanda watched, frozen. Kayla approached the podium, nervously adjusting the mic. "I didn't expect to be standing here. Honestly, I didn't expect people to see me for who I really am. For a while, I felt invisible, or worse, like a target." She looked out into the crowd. "But I'm not here because of what others did to me. I'm here because I didn't give up, and because the people who love me never stopped believing in me, even when it was hard." Her voice cracked slightly. "If you ever feel like you don't belong, like your voice doesn't matter, I promise you it does. Don't let anyone tell you different." She stepped back from the mic, and the entire auditorium rose in a standing ovation. Backstage, Dr. Morrison allowed herself a small smile. But the moment didn't end there. As Kayla returned to her seat, Amanda stood up. Her face was flushed, her hands shaking, but her eyes held something different: uncertainty, maybe even regret. I want to say something," she said suddenly. Gasps echoed. Principal Delgado hesitated. "Amanda, this isn't the time." "No," Kayla said quietly. "Let her." Amanda walked to the mic, her usual bravado nowhere to be seen. She glanced at Kayla, then at the crowd. "I was wrong," she said plainly. "I've been mean, I've been cruel, and I thought it made me strong, but really, it just made me scared of someone who was smarter than me, kinder than me, and more confident than I ever let myself be." She swallowed. "I'm sorry, Kayla." There was a stunned silence. Then Kayla nodded barely. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was acknowledgement. The first step. Later that night, Kayla sat alone on the front steps of the school, breathing in the cool air. Her mom joined her, 2 cups of cocoa in hand. "You were amazing," she said. "I didn't plan to say half that stuff," Kayla admitted. "That's the best part," Dr. Morrison smiled. "It was all you." Kayla looked up at the sky, stars just starting to poke through. "Do you think things will really change?" Dr. Morrison sipped her cocoa. "Not overnight, but you just lit a fire, and the right people saw it." Kayla leaned into her mother's shoulder, exhaling slowly. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she had to shrink herself to fit in. She didn't have to explain her worth to anyone. She was seen. She was heard. She was enough. And this was only the beginning. If this story moved you, don't let it stop here. Support stories that celebrate courage, truth, and the fight for dignity. Subscribe, share, and drop a comment, because your voice matters too.